The dashing 90s are a hard and eventful time. Was the peak of crime growth and social instability in Russia. Want to see a whole era in its cruelty and splendor, with her hopes and possibilities. The best way to do this is to watch the series Dashing, which is already available for viewing in online cinema start. This is Yuri Bull's new work, which is clearly traced iconic director's signature style, element based on true events, and honestly and without embellishment. Tell about the largest organized crime group in the history of Russia. Shows the 90s with all their cruelty. The action takes place in 3 time periods. In the early and late 90s and nowadays. In the center of the plot, huntsman Pavel Likovtsov, his son Zhenya with the onset of the 90s. Likovtsov family moves from Taiga to Khabarovsk. Here for survival, father and son have become part of a criminal group, which will take control. Largest territory in the world. Crime saga allows. See a time of massive change through father and son drama, and get to know the story better. For example, find out where the concept of Thieves' Dorm came from. Watch the series Dashing at the link in the description and use promo code HISTORY to get 14 days of free subscription. Online cinema start. For Halloween, kids traditionally dressed up as zombies, mummies of ghosts, and pirates. All sorts of monsters, understandable. But here are pirates. Not only are they not movie characters and do not superpowers, they are also a very real way of life, existing so far. But why then so popular and romanticized? Pirates of the Caribbean. The golden age of piracy. You will be surprised how much this story turned out to be. At the same time, banal and interesting. Because the so-called century lasted from strength to a couple of decades. We already have a video on the channel about the day of the life of a pirate. Today, we will talk about their history. The Pirates of the Caribbean. All other types of pirates. Were they really just in the Caribbean? And what about capitalism? Whistle everyone upstairs. We are going on a trip. Hope everyone understands. Pirates existed long before the discovery of America, and there are still pirates no more. Then another one form of robber lifestyle, which appeared almost immediately. How property inequality appeared in the world. If your neighbor has something, what don't you have? Then why not just take it away from him by force? Logic is simple as 3 pennies, and therefore a testimony of all kinds of robbers, both on land and water. We have since the invention of writing. Basically amazing that often sea and river robbers. That is pirates. In their development were ahead of the state fleets. Probably the thing is that they were private and were never constrained by laws and bureaucracy. So still in Egypt, when Ramses II mentions arrogant robbers, raids on coastal villages, and that the Egyptian navy can't do anything about it. Well, the case of the kidnapping of Caesar and his ransom perhaps. Most famous and illustrative. He is mentioned almost always when it comes to pirates of antiquity. Here we are no exception. States such. The effectiveness of sea wolves was appreciated and almost immediately. As soon as there is competition in history, factory trade routes, cooperation with pirates immediately enters the arena. By type, you do not touch us and we will not touch Enemies you. Of Rome paid pirates of the Mediterranean to spoil his navy life. What did Venice do about Constantinople? And in general, the whole of Europe in relation to the already Ottoman Empire. Pirates of the Caribbean are unique in that they were originally conceived as mercenaries. Themselves, they are in the Spanish colonies. There was no new light. These are the most famous privateers and corsairs, pirates with state. But let's start in order. So the end of the 15th century, Spanish navigator Christopher Columb opens a new light in Europe. This story you know. Yes, and we are not interested in details of contacts between Europeans and the local population and humanity. Europe then did not suffer. Spain with Portugal, after several disputes and conflicts, divided the whole territory outside Europe and began to brazenly rob everything. Latin America almost completely, except Brazil went to Spain. Giving in turn began to quickly isolate. England, France, and Holland saw it all and understood that humanity they also do not suffer, and also wanted to be gilded at the expense of some Aboriginal people. Then already began the 17th century, and this trio wasn't that influential at all, as we know them. All three were just starting to build their fleets and just entered their era of geographical discoveries. No resources from Spain. Push her already equipped colony was not. and therefore began to act more carefully, began to build colonies on less interesting lands to the north to open other territories, and at the same time try to patch your competitor. Here that capper and comes to light, true so far in the form of improvised military raids on self-reliance, that as we know near robbery. The first such raids take place closer to the middle of the 17th century, 1630s. Basically, at that time England armed a small fleet, who went to rob Spanish coastal colonies. 9 out of 10 such trips were extremely unsuccessful. These groups were hardly capable. Take Malomel fortified town. After initial provisions have been met, gunpowder and kernels in the budget, there was a bagel hole. Remind the purpose of such expeditions to be gilded. More navy. Such adventures than England could not afford, because the idea was essentially abandoned. However, in 1655, the English captured Spanish city Cogay, Jerseys, which would later be renamed Port Royal. The city will become one of the British Navy bases in the Caribbean, which he needed for so long, before any expeditions were going to England, and sailed across the Atlantic, suffering huge losses just down the road. Nevertheless, even this base did not cancel failure of previous robbery project. Spanish possessions. This role will be taken over by private individuals, settled in English and French possessions, in a new light, or in English privateers. In France they were called corsairs. In Holland by cappers. Yes, these are the same privates who collected expeditions at their own expense, received permits from their homeland and went to rob. Cursed Spaniards. Unlike previous hikes, cappers began to take risks, attacking not just Spanish possessions on land, but also on their ships on the high seas. Surprisingly, the scheme turned out to be working. That's how the era of piracy began. In the Caribbean, there were only Spaniards in the region. The waters were calm, but it was worth showing up to their competitors. How the total mayhem started. Shortly before the British took the Piano port, the French got themselves the island of Tortuga, near the Isle of Espagol. This is modern Haiti. Unlike Piano Port, a quiet and safe harbor, Tortuga was rocky and aggressive. Dock and sail there. Had to take difficult routes. What played into the hands of the defenders, but didn't really like everyone staying. Fortress Fort de Rocher was built on the island, which made the island quite impregnable. Then Tortuga governor, realizing what power he has here, sent the Spaniards and his French chiefs to hell. The island itself became a base and the unspoken capital for pirates. Exactly the same role played by the English Port Royal, having two fortresses at once. Piracy has become really thriving. Despite the word capital, actually these were safe zones. Pirates could sail, sell the loot, the proceeds to spend on provisions and repairs of the ship, and spend the rest on drinking a party, which in such a life could be the last, without fear of being arrested or killed by enemies. From there protects capper license, and from strangers the very essence of the safe zone. Even after the actual recovery, English power in Port Piano and French on Tortuga, local governors continued to actively cooperate with pirates and give them licenses. We true continued not long. Already in the 60s, England, France, and Spain stopped open military clashes. The pirate was banned. Continued to rob the Spaniards. The pirates didn't like it and they continued, as if nothing had happened. Rob Spanish people. Governor Port Piano perfectly understood complexity of the situation, and therefore one hand continued to issue licenses to pirates, and another wrote a letter to King Charles II. What to do about it? Nothing can. Tucking in at the same time in the envelope a percentage the existence of pirates continued. But now they were already really considered as if by criminals. Yet the golden age was in full swing, and therefore Port Royal and Tortuga actively competed with each other for the title of herself, the best and main capital of pirates, actively making them repair discounts, provisions, and licenses, and reducing the percentage of all trade. However, the patience of the metropolises also expired over the years. Pirates are slow, but surely began to be exterminated as unnecessary. In 1690, the port of Royal was almost totally destroyed by earthquake. And 2 years later, the last population of Tortuga is evacuated. The pirates lost both their capitals. Of course, there were other places where pirates could forget Khabarovsk, but because they did not go anywhere. Moreover, they went beyond the West Indies, forming the so-called Pirate Circle. Route through southern point of Africa to India, Arabia. Yes, the road is not closed, but the Navarre from there was much more. By the way, would you like to see such backs to the famous franchise? Write in the comments. Well, of course, pirates have long stopped robbing. Only Spaniards. Under the distribution fell in general everyone who met them. Petty? If pirates are already completely outlawed, 1,696 off the coast of the Bahamas arrived one of the most successful corsairs in history, Henry Avery. He had just returned from an expedition to India, and therefore he had enough to bribe the local governor. So the local capital of Nassau became the new pirate capital, and then history takes a turn. 1701, England enters a new war against Spain. And it would seem that the cappers came in handy again. But no, it was a war for Spanish inheritance in Europe, and not for her wealth in a new light. And therefore the vector of politics in general of all micropowers. What even happens in Estens? Well, pirates in Nassau become self-governing. So the famous pirate republic appeared. It is during this period that Seven Seas will walk. Famous pirates: Edward is Black, Bearded Jack Wreck, Ham Black Sam Bellamy, Charles Wayne, Mary Read, and Bonnie, and many others. In general, the period of the Pirate Republic, usually called Golden Age, piracy in the narrow sense, and the way we described in video one of the life of a pirate, mostly concerns this period. In the Constitution, this republic became a legendary pirate code, which is most likely was not well, at least in that form, in which we saw him in the movie. Several codes have reached our days. In the book A General History of Robberies and Murders, the most famous pirates, apparently they were all oral. In 1713 the war ended. In the 17th, a new governor arrived in the Bahamas, personally appointed by the king. It became clear Laffa ended. Governor announced that Corona amnesty everyone who will voluntarily surrender, and many were willing to go for it. However, there were eyewitnesses too loyal to pirate life. They chased away the royal troops from the island and began to prepare for war. Among them were those same black-bearded Rackham, Wayne, Riff, and Bonnie. A year later, the large English fleet returned with the same amnesty offer. Many accepted it, and the remaining did not hold the siege for long, if you can call her that. The result is simple to banality. The fight ended quickly. Many cameramen ran away, and for a while they continued to misbehave, until they ran into a sword or a block. Piracy. West India itself began to go out of fashion. Metropolises made peace, and their feud became exclusively diplomatic. Mercenaries have lost relevance, and the fight against them has become much more effective. Empires have already managed to fend off an impressive fleet. How we see our favorite, Captain Jack Sparrow, did not exist in a vacuum. All these pirates were closely related with main political, economic developments in Western Europe. If you want to know more about all these stories, raise your like high. And with this topic we are done. Before new meetings, friends.